In this presentation, we're going to be considering how to build an economy for everyone, how to pursue economic justice, particularly through fair trade. Fair trade is a type of program that CRS has been involved in for more than 15 years, and we want to help you understand why we promote fair trade, why it is important to our work, and how you can be involved in it. When we think about the word justice, it's associated with concepts like equality and fairness, what seems reasonable to us. If we think of some images in our society, we think of Lady Justice, who has a blindfold over her eyes because she's not supposed to discriminate between people based on their differences. So that's the notion of equality. She's also has in her hand a scale where we think of justice being balanced. And when it comes to economic justice, what we're referring to is really a balance of how we relate to one another as individuals and institutions in the marketplace. We all are really traders because none of us is self-sufficient. We have to trade our skills and our talents and our resources for those skills and talents and resources we don't have. And the marketplace is where those goods and services are exchanged. When we rely on one another, we promote the common good if we do the terms of trade in a way that reflects our notions of justice. In the current marketplace, there's a lot that's working. There's a lot that seems to allow for the exchange of goods, things that are maybe not always what we need, but what we want, like some gadgets, some machines, technology. Other things that we do need, like clothing and food, and experiences that we might not have if our economy wasn't so globalized, like the ability to encounter other cultures and explore other lands and peoples. So there's a lot about our globalized economy that really is helpful, beneficial, and should be protected and strengthened. Unfortunately, some things are not working for the majority of the world. If we look at concepts like inequality, if you juxtapose that t-shirt that the young woman is wearing that was made in Liberia with the phone, it would take the average Liberian about 6 months of income in order to afford to buy one phone if it was valued about $200. That kind of reality is worlds away from the economic reality that most of us who are listening to this presentation experience. And so we have to find ways to narrow the gaps of income and to lessen the inequality among peoples. Another thing that's not working is that there is outright and blatant exploitation. For instance, the picture shows that there's young people traveling. In this case, it was some students from the University of California at San Diego going on a trip to Mexico to meet with coffee farmers. But in fact, what some people call the dark underbelly of globalization is human trafficking, where people are taken from their homes to other countries in order to be exploited for their labor. This kind of trafficking is based on some of the economic factors, such as lack of employment options, vulnerability due to low income, and being at risk for exploitation based on social class. So obviously, exploitation, such as human trafficking, is one of the things that is not just about our global economy. And then another point is anonymity. We don't often know really who are the factory workers behind our laptops, our MP3 players, our televisions. We may not even know the people who harvested the coffee that we enjoy every day or gets us through exam times. Things like the anonymity that keep us disconnected from the people and the cultures who make the products in our lives possible are some of the things that contribute to economic injustice and are some of the things that fair trade tries to work against. In the Catholic social tradition, economic justice is thought of as using the marketplace in a way that the marketplace serves all people. When we think of the goods and services and the institutions that make those possible, institutions like government, institutions like businesses, even educational institutions that build skills that people need in order to participate in government or participate in business. All of those things are elements of the economy that are created for the purposes of making an economy function. But the bottom line is that the economy functions not in and of itself. It's not some disembodied market, but it actually should function for the people that make such an economy possible. So for instance, this is a family from Ghana. One of the members of the family is a cocoa farmer. The mother is a small business owner. This family together should be treated according to terms that work for that family and that community. They should not be considered as anonymous, undervalued, unequal people who can be exploited in order to get the products that we might need from them or want from them, such as chocolate bars. Throughout its work, CRS tries to take an approach to human development, whether it be in the economic realm or political realm, that we refer to as integral human development. And to get good outcomes for individuals and their communities, we have to recognize the interplay of the structures and systems in a society, as well as the assets that individuals and communities bring to bear, their spiritual and human assets like their talents and skills, as well as their financial assets, how much money they may have in savings or that they've inherited or that their community might share through savings programs. What we're working with in CRS is trying to build up the assets of people and their communities, make them resilient, especially when things like shocks of natural human disasters or economic trends happen, so that they have the ability to cope with those things, but also day in and day out, that they have the ability to access the structures and systems that are supposed to work for them, like the marketplace, like their government. And so we try to approach in all of our work in all of our work, what we try to do is build up the assets of individuals and communities so that they can take the best advantage and contribute to the structures and systems of their society. Fair trade in particular, and the fair trade program that Catholic Relief Services does here in the United States, has a framework that tries to take connections between you, the consumer, and build them directly with the producers, whether it be farmers of products like coffee or cocoa, or artisans, people who handcraft jewelry, clothing, home accessories. And we build those connections primarily through our partners. We work, as CRS does around the world, closely with community-based organizations. In the United States, we have more than a dozen who are fair trade companies, businesses that we believe in. And what we try to do is connect you as consumers with those partners. Those partners are relating to fair trade producers, and they're trading on fair trade terms, such that you can feel good about making purchases from those companies, knowing that they represent your values. But besides just a feel-good experience, you'll also get quality products, coffee, chocolate, crafts. And finally, those partners also, in addition to the relationships they have with the producers, because of their relationship with CRS, they make a contribution to us. And CRS then takes those donations and recycles them into grants. So it's a virtuous circle, or as you see on the screen, a triangle that's based on relationships. Consumer to producer, producer to partner, and back again. While we've been practicing fair trade for about 15 years or so, CRS actually is just one of many players in the fair trade movement. This timeline will show you kind of a quick overview of how the fair trade movement has evolved. It actually started in the 1940s after World War II as a faith-based movement. A Mennonite missionary first began trading with craftswomen from Puerto Rico. Later, Church of the Brethren established a craft organization known as SERVE. In the 50s, the concept grew and evolved such that in the 60s, there were new initiatives, both at the different denominations participated, including in the Catholic faith, the Vatican endorsed cooperative enterprises as one way to achieve economic justice. In the secular world, the UN Conference of Trade and Development embraced the notion that we shouldn't try to address economic inequality only through aid, but also using trade as a concept of building up the assets of individuals and communities. In the 70s, here in the United States, the first 10,000 Villages store opened. 10,000 Villages is a fair trade chain that many of you may know because of its retail presence in many communities, offering customers fair trade options. In the 80s, there were associations that began to be formed, like the International Federation of Alternative Trade. It is now known as the World Fair Trade Organization. In the 1990s, other associations, like here in the United States, the Fair Trade Federation, began. In 1995 is when CRS began to work with SERVE, as we created together a crafts program called Work of Human Hands. This is a program that allows individuals to make purchases through a catalog filled with crafts that were made under fair trade terms from artisan groups around the world, but it also allows parishes and colleges and other community groups to hold consignment sales where the whole community can come together to enjoy the products, learn about fair trade, and also purchase gifts that can then be given to others to spread the message of fair trade and also to increase the impact on artisans. The allied group Lutheran World Relief began a coffee initiative with the fair trade company Equal Exchange back in the 90s. The labeler for fair trade, the Fair Trade Labeling Organization that began certification of fair trade products, also began in the 90s. In as the new century came, advocacy groups such as the Fair Trade Resource Network were established. CRS began to be involved in coffee because this was unfortunately a time of a coffee price crisis, and we learned through our programs in Nicaragua that coffee farmers were having to leave their farms and abandon them because the price of coffee was so low they could not feed their families and operate their farms. And in fact, the Bishop of Maltagalpa in Nicaragua reached out to Catholic Relief Services to try to make sure that humanitarian assistance was offered, but also CRS Nicaragua worked with coffee farmers to begin a project that helped those farmers organize into cooperatives and sell their products to U.S. Catholics and others of goodwill. And that's when CRS here in the United States began our coffee work. By the year 2004, we had generated more than $1 million worth of sales from crafts and coffee. But it wasn't just about selling. In the movement, also students were beginning to get involved. The United Students for Fair Trade had its first convergence in 2004. The U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops formally endorsed fair trade, and that was a very important milestone for the Catholic community in the States to have the leadership of the church endorse this concept. Around the world, though, because this wasn't just a U.S. phenomenon, we were seeing also incredible growth. Back in 2009, there was the World Fair Trade Day, which is celebrated the second Saturday of May all around the world. And here in the United States, there were 65,000 fair traders stopping and pausing and taking a fair trade break just in this one country. Other milestones happened throughout the years. What's most important now is that you all, in your position as campus leaders, student activists, figure out what it is that you want to do for the future of fair trade to continue to promote economic justice. It's important for you to have an understanding of fair trade in terms of its principles and its practices. There are actually, here in the United States, 9 fair trade principles that have been codified by the Fair Trade Federation, which is an association of companies and organizations that are fully committed to fair trade. But instead of going through all 9, just going to distill it down into 3 important points. People are paid fairly in a safe and decent working environment. The planet is protected through sustainable production methods. And partnerships are key to restoring equity in trade and promoting the common good. Because as we said, injustice happens when people are not treated fairly, when there's anonymity, when there's exploitation. If there are true partnerships between producers and companies and consumers, then that inequality is reduced. So people, planet, and partnerships are the core principles of fair trade. On the website that accompanies this presentation, you'll find links to the websites that will illustrate all 9 principles and other parts of the, give you some background from this presentation if you need it. Here at CRS, we have some current standards for the fair trade partners that we do business with. There are 2 primary standards. One is membership in the Fair Trade Federation. So as I said, that's an association of companies that are fully committed. If they're a coffee company, all of their coffee is fair trade. If they're a crafts company, all of their crafts are fair trade. They have put those 3 fundamental principles at the forefront of their business model. Another way that a partner can be part of the CRS network is if all of their products are certified fair trade by a group called Fair Trade USA. It's the organization here in the United States that works with the global certifier, the Fair Trade Labeling Organization, in order to set the standards and audit that those standards have been met for a particular product line. And if a company has all of its products certified, then they're eligible for membership in the CRS network. But there are lots of new standards that are coming into the marketplace and onto the scene. And we just take a moment to look at what some of those are. Probably some of those are familiar to you, like USDA Organic. This is a certification that comes through in cooperation with government bodies like the Department of Agriculture. Then there are other certifiers who are independent certifiers alongside groups like Fair Trade USA, such as Fair for Life. There are some certifiers like the Rainforest Alliance, which is focused on a different set of standards and a different set of circumstances, such as plantations. CRS works with farmers in some cases to try to help them, particularly if they're workers and they're not owners of a farm, to be part of the rainforest system so that they have access to that specialty market. And then some companies are also adopting their own standards. So some of you who might shop at Whole Foods, for instance, have seen the Whole Trade Guarantee. And that is a constellation of certifications that Whole Foods uses to choose, according to each product, whether or not it meets the standards set by the Whole Foods Corporation. And in each of these cases, CRS has, in the countries that we work in overseas that are involved in agro-enterprise products, we have seen the benefits that sometimes can accrue to farmers who participate in these systems. When we work directly with producers, depending on the product and the commodity and the location and the needs of the producer group, we may have different types of interventions that we do with our partners. In coffee, we work primarily in Latin America, and we have a growing presence in East Africa. And our work sometimes involves organizing cooperatives, helping the farmer leaders set up the rules and regulations for how their cooperative is going to operate as a democratic institution, or we may be working on production techniques that improve quality, or we may be working on value chain activities that help producers access some of those specialty markets like we just saw, organic or Rainforest Alliance. We also do a little bit of crafts work. In Madagascar, we helped women who were in a food center receiving nutrition supplements so they could address the malnutrition in their families. We worked with those women who were artisans to help them get the training they need to improve their products and export them to the U.S. market through a fair trade partner. These are just some of the examples of how we're trying to increase the chances of justice in the marketplace for those individual producers by applying the principles of integral human development, taking what their assets are, trying to work within certain structures and systems so that they have better outcomes as individuals in terms of their income, but also as communities in terms of the civil society organizations that have been developed, such as artisan associations, and also that there's an opportunity for community investment. A lot of times people think of fair trade and they think of a fair price, but actually what's a really important concept within fair trade is what's known as the social premium, where not an individual artisan or farmer benefits, but the buyer of a product invests an extra premium into the whole association or cooperative, and that association democratically determines how that money is going to be spent for the benefit of the whole community, whether it be to pave roads so there are more transportation options, or to train teachers so that the quality of education increases, whatever the community decides together that would be working best for itself. That's one of the elements of fair trade. And that's what the fair trade businesses that we are involved with try to do, and we do that also in many instances, particularly in the coffee sector, right alongside the producers. We also try to be aware of the changing realities of coffee producers, particularly around climate change. This chart is going to just take you through what are the best altitudes for coffee. Right now, it's best to grow specialty coffee at about 4,000 feet. And this is a coffee farmer from Guatemala. The picture is of her hand cranking a coffee mill, but first she had to grow that coffee. Unfortunately, because of climate change, in Latin America we're finding that because of rainfall changes, temperature changes, that the altitude that is necessary to grow specialty coffee is changing. And what the predictions are is that by 2020, in just less than 10 years, farmers will need to be at an altitude of 4,600 feet. By 2050, they will have to have their crops growing at 5,300 feet. Well, of course, this presents a dilemma for the farmers because they can't simply sell their land and move higher up a mountain. So what are they going to do? First, there are some opportunities to mitigate the problems of climate change by growing tree cover or new types of irrigation or drainage, depending on the situation. So we work with farmers to mitigate, and then we also work with farmers to adapt to climate change. And one way might be to diversify their incomes by planting other crops besides coffee. One of the things that we say about climate change is that unfortunately the people that are least responsible for climate change are the ones who suffer most the negative impacts of climate change. And that says to us that we as consumers have a responsibility to work against these kinds of tragedies unfolding. So what we call you as college students and leaders to do is to try to be involved in fair trade as one way to work toward economic justice in the face of these daunting realities. So there are a couple of things that we can suggest you do to be involved. One is to convert your dining hall at your institution to fair trade coffee. You'll need to build awareness and educate people about why that's important. We hope that you'll work alongside our coffee company partners that you can find on our coffee map at crsfairtrade.org to build long-term engagement where you can have those partners actually provide the coffee on campus. And that will translate into business for them, but it will also mean that the volume of coffee that fair trade farmers are able to sell increases. So converting your dining hall is one very tangible step that you can take as a campus. You may hear through groups like United Students for Fair Trade or the Fair Trade Towns movement that there are even opportunities to designate your university a fair trade university or a fair trade college. So that's something that you could explore as to whether or not you want to convert your dining hall and what you might be able to achieve as an institution in terms of fair trade status. But it's not just all about coffee. Another thing to do would be to mix it up a little bit and have a work of human hands craft sale. This would be an opportunity to bring together students and choose products that you think would be popular on campus, sell them to administrators, faculty, other students, and do so in a way that also gives an opportunity to build awareness and education, as well as know that each purchase translates into real income for artisans. There's also chocolate. We have a program called Raise Money Right, which encourages you to use fair trade chocolate for fundraisers for special service trips or other activities on campus that you might need a little bit of extra funds for. And there's also on the scene fair trade apparel. Students have been very involved in the anti-sweatshop movement throughout the years. There's certainly union-produced clothing such as that of Alta Gracia, which is a factory in the Dominican Republic that is offering up products specifically for the university market. And then there's also everyday clothing that is being produced under fair trade standards and an apparel pilot that's going on through the year 2013. So you might want to check out what should be in your closets that reflect the values of economic justice. But it's not all about consumption. It's not all about what you buy or what you enjoy eating or drinking. You also have roles as citizens. And so another thing that you can do is to be involved in Catholics Confront Global Poverty, which is a campaign that CRS does jointly with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. And two particular focus points for students would be climate change, as also discussed, because of the impacts that are being felt around the world on producers, but also the topic of extractives, how companies are extracting natural resources from countries and communities all over the world, and what those policies are, and what the government requires of the companies in terms of transparency and accountability for how they are gaining the minerals that go into cell phones, or the resources that make things like jewelry possible, gold and diamonds. So those are two particular topics you'll find out more about if you join the Catholics Confront Global Poverty. campaign. And we ask that you do join as much as you can into our broader community. As you learn more about fair trade, as you think more and act more about economic justice, we want to hear about your reactions, your experiences. CRSfairtrade.org has a blog that we hope that you comment on, and we also welcome your own material and content if you have something to share. You can also find us on Facebook, and that's one way that you can connect with others, not just on your campus, but around the country, who are trying to put the practices of fair trade into their campus communities to serve economic justice. So these are just some of the ways you can stay connected with people, you can be an advocate, and you can also be a promoter of fair trade products on your campus as we all try to work together to build an economy for everyone. As we mentioned before, the economy is for us. It's for the people that we rely on, even if we don't exactly know who they are. We've seen some pictures in the presentation, a Liberian woman wearing a t-shirt, a Mexican coffee farmer traveling with college students, a Ghanaian cocoa farmer resting with his family. These are all people who make the products in our lives possible. We can be in connection with them, and we can do it on terms that we believe in, the values of the Catholic social teaching, also the principles of fair trade. We're really delighted that you're interested in fair trade and bringing it into your heart and home and your place of work and worship, like your school. So thanks for your interest in fair trade, and we look forward to answering any questions you have by reaching us on our website. Please go to that website and find all the resources you need and ways to contact us directly if we can be of service to you.